Okay, we're going to start on the third book in our Turners series, which is called, well, where is it? There it is. It is The Turners Fully Doomed. And on this one, I've already read a bit. It doesn't start with chapter 1. It starts with chapter 0, Infestation. Yes, hello, Poppy, darling. For the 38th time since his shift began, Davidson McGee was worrying about mouse poo. Worrying about mouse poo was an important part of his job. He worried about it at precise 5-minute intervals from the moment he clocked on until he clocked off again 10 hours later. And when he wasn't worrying about mouse poo, Davidson McGee worried that he wasn't worrying about it enough. Then he would worry about it again and feel relieved to be worrying about it once more. As he stared into the eyepiece on the X-ray monitor of the NIDAC 244 processing machine, McGee cursed the existence of mouse poo. As the quality control clerk at NIDAC Incorporated, every night he was engaged in a man versus poo battle. If he detected even one tiny pellet of it in an evening's output of preservative 164, the consequences would be disastrous. It wasn't just that he would be fired, that would just be the start. The thousands of kilograms of preservative 164 that he was personally responsible for overseeing each evening would have to be destroyed. The NIDAC 244, the world's only machine capable of producing preservative 164, would have to be dismantled and sterilised. NIDAC Incorporated would lose millions of dollars worth of orders, and food production worldwide would grind to a halt. Few people knew about preservative 164, and yet its invention revolutionised food processing. It tasted like nothing, and once dissolved it looked like nothing, but it prolongs the shelf life of virtually every food that humans eat. Milk, bread, cheese, chocolate, pasta, coffee, juice, fizzy drinks, rice, biscuits, anything in a tin. All of them have preservative 164 mixed in there somewhere. McGee watched intently as wave after wave of the pure white powder gushed through the NIDAC 244's hydraulic conveyor belt towards the thousands of shiny silver tins that caught it at the far end of the factory floor. From there it would be shipped all over the globe, just as it had been for more than 20 years. It was a perfect, beautiful, automated process, and Davidson McGee considered himself the guardian of it all. He was sort of like a god, a greying, stoop-back, pot-bellied god personally ensuring the health of millions of people and guaranteeing the billion-dollar annual profits of NIDAC Incorporated. McGee had a sudden jolt of guilt. Mouse poo! He had let himself go almost 6 minutes without thinking about it. 6 minutes! He scanned the X-ray monitor and saw with relief that everything was fine. Focus, McGee, he thought. Despite the vacuum-sealed doors and windows of the NIDAC factory, no eating my book, McGee knew that the threat of mice could not be underestimated. He had done the maths. He knew that a mere 5 mice could multiply into 50 mice in 3 months. When mice have babies, they have a lot of babies. And that in another 3 months, those 500 mice, leave my computer alone, Miss Ebony, will have created, those 500 mice will have multiplied into 5,000 mice. And that within a year, those original 5 mice will have created 50,000 children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. But this was hardly the worst of it. Davidson McGee knew also for a fact that a single mouse can produce 50 droppings per night. And with 50,000 mice pooping away all night long, those original 5 mice had the capacity to generate a stinking germ-filled pile of 912,500,000 droppings per year. McGee's head ached at the scale of it. Those tiny, furry, pooping rodents were out there, scratching, scraping, desperate to get inside NIDAC's perfectly sterile walls. Not on my watch, thought Davidson McGee, straightening his lab coat. In 20 years, not a single molecule of bacteria had ever contaminated any shipment of preservative 164. His success rate had been 100%. It took commitment to stare into the eyepiece of the X-ray monitor, rarely blinking, always thinking of the satisfaction that awaited at the end of the shift, knowing that another shipment was on its way, and that NIDAC's millions of customers were untainted. Stop trying to eat my book. Mouse poo, thought McGee with frustration. How long it had been since he'd thought about it. 7 minutes at least. Sloppy, he thought. He's been so sloppy. Mice weren't sloppy. They were small and stealthy. He could not let them beat him. McGee rubbed the back of his neck and breathed in deeply through his nose, stifling a yawn. Then he felt something crawling up his ankle. His whole body shuddered. He didn't dare take his face away from the eyepiece of the Nidak 244. He slowly moved his hand across to the golf ball-shaped red button on which Nidak's console stood, the kill switch. Pressing it would immediately shut down the Nidak 244 and compromise the entire night's output of Preservative 164. In 20 years, he had never pressed it. He breathed in deeply, wondering if the crawling sensation was just a particularly ferocious itch from the knee-high white socks he always wore. But then he felt the ominous grip of thick, stick-like legs clawing at the skin in the small gap between the top of his socks and the hem of his brown polyester shorts. Spider, he thought, sweat trickling from his brow. It was big, nightmarishly big and heavy. He could feel the weight of it pulling at his leg hairs as it dragged itself up over his knees and towards his shorts. He tried to keep his body perfectly still, but his hands trembled on the Nidak 244's controls. His fingers hovered towards the kill switch again. Should he do it? Should he sacrifice the entire night's output? Using every ounce of willpower to remain still, McGee glanced down and saw that the spider poised on his shorts. He suppressed a violent shudder. The creature was enormous, a monstrosity. Its back was half the size of a melon. The span of its legs was wider than his hands. As sweat trickled down his brow, he tried to think of what sort of arachnid grew to such gruesome scales. He knew his knowledge of insects was limited to the occasional wildlife documentary by that white-haired British chap. Huntsman? Tarantula? They were all abominations, but they didn't have bodies as colossal as the hairy beast perched on his knee. Again his hand drifted hesitantly towards the kill switch as a stream of sweat trickled a line down his back. No, he was not about to taint his 20-year record. His mind raced. How had the spider made it into the building? Nidak Incorporated was absolutely airtight. He'd seen to it himself. He made a note to have the fumigators triple spray the perimeter of the compound and check the rubber seals all around the vents again. All the while, kilo after kilo of Preservative 164 continued to pump through the processing machine as the spider edged closer to the seat of his pants. Now, Davidson McGee saw something that did make his stomach lurch. Something was inside the Nidak 244. A rodent. A big, ugly specimen of living, breathing rat was scuttling across the conveyor belt inside the machine. He could see it perfectly on the X-ray monitor, its muscly body bounding to the centre of the screen, giving him a perfect view of its skeleton. A sound burst from McGee's mouth, the sort of barely human gasp of horror that is usually followed by explosive vomiting. He jerked to his feet, his chair falling backwards, his open hand about to slam down on the kill switch, but not before he could touch it. His thigh exploded in white-hot pain as the spider's razor-sharp fangs pierced right through his shorts. His eyeballs felt like they were being pulled backwards through their sockets. He lurched sideways, his whole body in an uncontrollable spasm. He was barely aware of the gargantuan spider dropping to the floor from his leg and scurrying away across the floor. The last thing that Davidson McGee saw as he slipped into the toxic coma that would imprison him for a month was the incomprehensible sight of the enormous rodent in the X-ray monitor, standing on its hind legs and peeing straight into the mass of Preservative 164 powder, sullying an entire shipment that by morning would follow its automated route onto trucks and planes all over the world. Unbeknown to McGee, the muscly, slack-jawed rat was not merely sullying the powder with a liquefying dose of toxins that had the power to catastrophically alter every turner on Earth. It was also writing its name in the P. M-U-N-G-O. Mungo. That is the end of Chapter 0.